Riot has decided to nerf Static Shiv once again in 13.19, so is it even worth picking up now? There's yet another new Briar build popping off in high elo, and despite her nerfs this patch, Briar is still looking extremely powerful. This and so much more as we provide you guys with a complete update on the solo queue meta, along with any new emerging trends, thanks to the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. The craze over the past few patches for Renekton has been the item combo of Gore Drinker and Spear of Shojin, but pros are really liking an alternative setup. Stridebreaker in place of Gore Drinker is seeing way more play in high elo, and actually has a significantly higher win rate than Gore. Renekton players rushing Stridebreaker are winning about 3% more than those going Gore Drinker. You've just got more consistent damage threat coming out of Stridebreaker, and in combination with Spear of Shojin, provides Renekton with a massive 2-item spike. Think of it like this: if you plan on team fighting and your team is lacking a tank who can frontline, going for Gore Drinker makes more sense. If you are ahead early game, just want to smash the 1v1 and look to draw pressure through the side lane, Stridebreaker is going to be superior. All in all, don't sleep on Stridebreaker for Renekton, as it's much stronger than many people may think. In regards to Renekton's tier list placement, he's going to remain in the S tier for 13.19. With Static Shiv nerfed this patch, there has been one top lane champ affected, being Quinn. The nerf hasn't really affected Quinn's power level, it's just made a few alternative builds much more attractive now. The boss has been running a full-out lethality setup on his Quinn, rushing Prowler's Claw, going Ghostblade second, and then Lord Dom's third. Build is actually performing quite well analytically too, and has pretty disgusting one-shot potential, so it's a new one to try. You also want to be taking Electrocute for the Keystone rune to really amplify that one-shot power. Storm Razor is another viable option as well in place of Shiv. In 13.18, Static had been outperforming Storm Razor slightly on the analytical side of things, but now that Shiv has been nerfed, Storm Razor has taken over. A sample core build that you can look to run is Storm Razor into Ghostblade second and the Collector third. Quinn will not be shifted anywhere on the tier list for the mid-patch update despite the nerfs to Static Shiv, as she remains an OP pick. Taking a look at the top lane tier list, we have Malphite, Illaoi, and Quinn locking down OP tier spots. It was just Gangplank and Renekton who were adjusted for top lane this patch, and the changes have landed where we expected. Gangplank buffs did not increase his power level a significant amount, so he continues to be placed in the top lane A tier. Renekton is now more exploitable if you're playing an AP top laner, but he's still a phenomenal pickup into many AD fighters, so even though he's not the OP pick from 13.18, he's still a great S tier pickup. A few of the best top lane bans of the patch include Illaoi, Aatrox, and Malphite. Malphite, Mundo, and Garen are a few very easy top laners that can help you climb low elo the fastest. One adjustment we'll be making to the jungle tier list for mid-patch is moving Rek'Sai even further down. For the pre-patch tier list, Rek'Sai was dropped from OP and moved into S, but the nerfs have panned out much more detrimental than that. Nerfs this patch have seen Rek'Sai's overall win rate plummet around 4%, which is a pretty massive hit. Now, due to the fact Rek'Sai was just so broken in 13.18, the 4% drop doesn't actually kill the champion, but she is no longer an elite option for solo queue. You can definitely still make the champion work, but with a strong ganker like Jarvan still in a great spot, there's really no reason to prioritize Rek'Sai over J4. B tier is where Rek'Sai will be placed for the mid-patch update. If you guys caught our recent OP builds video, we had a crit Briar build featured. There's also Bruiser that is really good right now, but there's even a lethality setup with great power that is catching steam in high elo. Rush item is Duskblade, you go the Collector second, and then grab Prowler's Claw third. Very important to note as well is that you should be taking Hail of Blades and Runes instead of Conqueror. This setup is all about getting as much burst damage off in as short a time as possible, so it makes way more sense to run Hail of Blades. So when should you be playing this lethality build instead of going for the more popular Bruiser? Well, the lethality setup will suit you best into comps who are squishy with less lockdown crowd control. Say for example you're up against a Nidalee jungle and a Gangplank top. Both are quite squishy champions and neither have any hard CC, so it's going to give the lethality setup a ton of strength. Now vice versa, if you were up against a Zac jungle and a Malphite top, you'd kind of be inting by building lethality. You're just not going to be able to one-shot those champs, and you'll get CC'd up and bursted out too fast if you try, so Bruiser is better in that case. All in all, Briar is such a unique champion with so many different viable ways to play her, and even though she was nerfed this patch, her overall power level remains extremely high and is placed in the jungle OP tier. So for the jungle tier list, the OP tier will consist of 3 champions being Nocturne, Briar, and Evelynn. We've already discussed Rek'Sai and Briar, who were the 2 junglers nerfed for this patch, but what about the 2 junglers who were buffed, being Lee Sin and Nunu? Lee has actually gained a considerable amount of strength off the back of his buffs, as they were targeted towards helping him out in the early game, which is exactly what Lee wants. Spear of Shojin as a core pickup is actually becoming increasingly popular on Lee in the higher ranks, and it's heavily outperforming Black Cleaver, so definitely look to try out the Gore Drinker into Shojin combo on Lee if you haven't already. Taking all of this into account, we're going to be giving Lee the bump from A into S tier for the mid-patch update. Nunu, on the other hand, is not really seeing much more success due to his AP ratio buff on E. As expected, tank builds are still heavily outperforming AP, so Nunu's relative strength for solo queue has not shot up at all, and he remains in the jungle A tier. The most ban-worthy junglers for 13.19 include Briar, Evelynn, and Nocturne. If you really want to climb low elo the fastest, look into spamming Rammus, Shyvana, or Nocturne. So it turns out Riot decided to throw in some last-minute LeBlanc nerfs to 13.19 that we were not originally aware of when creating the pre-patch tier list, so let's break them down. There's a lot of base stat nerfs here, with LeBlanc's attack speed ratio, attack speed growth, attack damage growth, mana growth, and mana regen growth all being reduced. Of course, these nerfs were issued to try and combat the AD LeBlanc builds that were becoming very popular in high elo. Now, to compensate, WAP ratio was increased by 5%, and EAP ratio was increased by 5% as well. Whether you're playing AP or AD LeBlanc, all changes considered, these are just flat-out nerfs to the champion. AD builds are pretty much dead now, as we also have to factor in that Static Shiv was nerfed, and it has seen a sharp decline in win rate. If we look back to 13.18, LeBlanc players rushing Static Shiv were winning about 48% of the time. Now, in 13.19, it's dropped all the way down to 42%, which is just pretty unplayable. AP builds are without question the way to go now, but even then, the champ is really not worth playing. Until Riot issues a hotfix buff or ends up buffing LeBlanc in the next few patches, we would definitely recommend staying away for the time being. LeBlanc will be moved down into the C tier for the mid lane as one of the weakest solo queue options. Mid lane was the role with the most amount of champion changes for this patch, but the meta remains pretty stable, with Vex as the only OP carry. Lissandra, Syndra, and Galio were all buffed, and the changes have panned out to our expectations. Lissandra and Syndra are both really good S tier solo queue carries as a result of their buffs, while Galio is just smidge below, holding down an A tier spot. As for Azir, he was the only mid laner nerfed other than LeBlanc, and he has seen a decline in strength matching our expectations from the pre-patch tier list. Azir is now down in the mid lane B tier as a champion that you should only be playing if you are one trick. A few of the best mid lane bans for the patch include Zed, Naafiri, and Vex. Malzahar, Aurelion Sol, and Annie are a cut above when it comes down to consistently strong low elo options. The big meta-shifting change down in the bot lane for 13.19 was the nerf to Static Shiv. As a result of the nerfs, there are now just 3 ADCs that you should still be building Static Shiv on. Zeri is one of the few ADCs who is still viable with Static Shiv, but even then, more and more pros have started swapping over to Stormrazor. Zeri isn't really a champion that you should be putting high priority on right now for solo queue anyways, but if you do intend to play her, trying out the Stormrazor rush is what we'd advise. Sivir is one other ADC that is still finding good success with Static Shiv, as the wave clear in combination with her W and Q remains too good to pass up on. The third ADC who you should continue building Shiv on is Vayne. Vayne just desperately needs that wave clear from Shiv, so even though it's been nerfed a bunch of times, it still remains an optimal pickup. As for the champions who are better off with alternative options now, first up we have Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa is just much better suited going lethality with the Umbral Glaive Rush in place of Static Shiv. Umbral into Duskblade and Nashor's Tooth is such an OP build right now. Caitlyn is another ADC who is a big Shiv user in recent patches, but now that the item has been nerfed multiple times while Stormrazor was just buffed, you really want to be rushing the Stormrazor on Kate from now on. The majority of Tristana players have been running Kraken Slayer in recent patches, and it's really the only rush item you should be playing now. A few Trist players are still rushing Shiv, but it's just not worth it after the nerfs. And lastly, Varus was an ADC who was extremely popular with Shiv a few patches back, but with multiple nerfs, the hybrid build of Shiv, Nashor's, and Riftmaker is just too weak now. Kraken Rush is going to be a much better option now in place of Shiv for Varus. Moving on to having a look at the ADC tier list. Ashe locks down an OP tier spot once again, but she's no longer alone as Kai'Sa will be moved up to join her. The lethality build on Kai'Sa is super insane right now, as it's much easier to execute than the on-hit build and just offers more consistent carry power for the average Kai'Sa player. Even if you're a terrible mechanical player, you can make this build work just due to how much damage is coming out of Q. Jhin and Twitch are trailing ever so slightly in behind as a result of their buffs and could very well be in for a push into OP in the coming patches. As we mentioned in the pre-patch tier list, Twitch buff was a difficult one to predict where it would land just due to the unique nature of the change, but it's given him a considerable bump in power. About a 1% increase in win rate overall, which is not super big, but it's moved him up in priority and locked him down as a great S tier option. A couple of ADCs that are most ban-worthy for 13.19 include Kai'Sa, Ashe, and Ezreal. Sivir, Misfortune, and Ashe are the top tier ADCs when it comes down to climbing low elo the fastest. Another patch where there's really nothing new going on in the support role, so let's dive right into the tier list. OP tier does not change for mid-patch, as we have Zyra, Blitzcrank, and Rakan as the optimal carries. Pyke was the only support change for 13.19, and we noted in the pre-patch tier list that the changes were more placebo than anything. It's definitely panned out that way, as Pyke has seen a very small increase in win rate for this patch by about 0.2%, so it's nothing to write home about. Adding one of Zyra or Xerath to your champion pool is really great value right now. Jhin and Ashe are both being played quite a bit for ADC, and pairing Xerath or Zyra up with them is free kills at level 6. Even with lethality Kai'Sa being in meta, if you can chunk the enemy with a bit of poke as Xerath, the Kai'Sa can just R in and finish off kills with ease due to the crazy damage from her Q. A few supports that are highest on the ban list consist of Nautilus, Blitzcrank, and Rakan. Heimerdinger, Zyra, and Blitz are the most optimal support to climb low elo. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that's going to wrap everything up for this one, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you back soon.